what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Chasing Dreams podcast with Charlie and Justin. We're on episode 140. And now that I kind of do the quick math in my head, we're actually approaching a 3-year anniversary here before you know it.
Holy macaroni. 3 years.
Because 3 years would be what? 156, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, we're almost there. Few months and we are on it.
That's wild.
Yeah, I know. It's actually, and I know we say this all the time and we mentioned it, multitude of times at this juncture, but we just it's so kind of I don't want to say inspiring because I'm not trying to overestimate it, but it's pretty cool to me and pretty motivating to me that we've actually never missed a weekend and that we've posted every Saturday for slowly approaching the 3-year mark, because that was kind of the promise we made when we first started, was as long as we're going to do this, we're going to make sure that we have an episode out every week. And we've talked about it before, how we've ran into some roadblocks or some obstacles periodically along the way, which made it really difficult. I mean, we've called from across the country at times and done Zooms at 2 a.m, 3 a.m. I mean, heck, sometimes it feels
11 at night.
Yeah, 11 at night. Sometimes it feels like we sleep in when we do 5 o'clock, but always got to make it happen, right?
That's right.
So how was your week?
Right.
I guess I want to say so far, because I typically picture the week ending Sunday. I don't know how most people view it, but how's your week, man?
That's how I look at it too. It's been good. It was a busy week. It was long and busy. Good busy, just lots of accomplished things done. But I actually had a pretty cool thing happen. So I was talking to one of the guys that work at the same company I work at, and just seeing how they were doing. It was real hot, so I was doing a lot of running, checking on guys, and we just got on a sidebar conversation, and he said something about, because he said he was doing a bunch, like doing schoolwork on his lunch break and just a whole bunch of stuff. And he says, yeah, you just got to keep chasing your dreams. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. That's the name of the podcast I do. And he's like, oh my, you are the guy. So I ran into a guy that listens to our podcast. So I thought that was pretty cool.
That's very neat. Yeah, it's like validating, I guess, for lack of a better word, when you get people that actually listen and give feedback and mention things from episode to episode. Because periodically I'll have someone that I run into that says, even if I tell a story of something that happened and someone said, oh, I already heard that. I remember you told that on the podcast 2 weeks ago, or whatever it is. So that's definitely makes it worthwhile. And then plus, with you and I, as busy as we are, this is kind of like a metaphor for a lot of things that we preach. Like, we preach consistency. We preach not making excuses. We preach being able, especially when it comes to fitness and health, how you don't really have to dedicate as much time as people would think, because I think that's one of the difficult parts for people to grasp when they start working out, is that more is not necessarily better. I mean, to a degree it is, but there's a point of diminishing returns. And in order to be effective, you don't have to have an exhausting amount of work in the gym or dedicated to your exercise. It doesn't take that long. You can get an effective workout in 15-20 minutes if necessary. So
right. And
you and I kind of use this podcast to show that, hey, you can get it in whenever and be done with it.
Yeah. I feel like some of our best episodes have been the ones that were, 30 minutes.
Yeah. Not necessarily a time crunch, but expedited a little bit.
Right. Yeah. The ones that everything flowed, it was perfect. And then, when all said and done, after the commercial break and stuff, it was 30 to 45 minutes. I feel like some of those have been the best ones, meaning it doesn't take an hour and a half. You don't have to go, what we used to say early on, full Rogan and do a 3-hour podcast.
Yeah.
For it to be great.
Yeah.
Same thing in the gym or anywhere. It doesn't have to be your meal plan doesn't have to be $500 a week. It can be chicken, rice, and broccoli. It can be 15 minutes of high intensity interval training and you're moving on to the next thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't take all day to be consistent.
Well, and I think that you could say the same thing with the gym too, when you said that some of the best episodes are the ones that were doing pretty quickly. It's the same thing in the gym where there's been times when I've had strict cutoffs in terms of times because I have to leave, or significantly more often than not, I have someone coming in to train. So I have a client that I have to get started on. So it's kind of like, all right, guys, we're on this time crunch. We got to be done in X amount of time. And those are the workouts that tend to be the best because we fit the most amount of stuff in. And
right.
I read this quote the other day, and I think that I shared this. If memory serves, we've talked about it on the podcast recently, but when you've had 140 episodes, some of them start to blend together. I saw this tweet, and it was kind of like a life hack or whatever, and it said something along the lines of allocating 25% less time to a particular task than originally thought necessary. So like if I think something's going to take me an hour, cut 25% of that. So schedule 45 minutes to do that, whatever it is. And the premise is that there's some term given to it, like some psychological term or whatever, that essentially saying that the work that you do fits the time that you allocate to it. So like a job can take you much quicker or much longer. So if you make a longer amount of time to, like, let's say a job would take me an hour, hypothetically. If I scheduled 2 hours of time for that job, the job would take me longer than an hour. It'd take me about 2 hours, just because, like, whether it's subconscious or psychological or what, but you have that mapped out in your head of how long that's going to take, and you'll finish up right about the time you allocate. So the whole premise of the tweet was, or the suggestion was, to allocate less time towards all your tasks, and then you will make sure that it forces you to, like, not take breaks and forces you to work. Because I mean, you and I've talked about this several times, like how distracted can you get just from looking at your phone, and how much time can that take?
Yeah, like going down the wormholes, or the rabbit hole of life.
Yeah. And I feel like my phone I've been pretty good with it, truthfully, just because of I've been trying to schedule more things like that, where I don't have a lot of time. So I'll find myself being cognizant, at least, of when I'm on my phone. I don't like completely eliminate the whole Instagram scrolling thing. It's still something that I have to deal with on a regular basis. Not deal with, but unfortunately I tolerate it from myself. Like, I'll get out my phone and just be, usually I'm on social media for purpose, and then purpose turns into amusement or entertainment, and then I'll find myself just scrolling down. So anyways, I at least find myself being aware of that now. So when I sit down and I'm on my phone, I'm scrolling, I'm not accomplishing anything or going through it, I'll be like, okay, I need to stop this and actually get something done and be productive.
Right.
So it's like mindfulness is the first step, right?
That's right.
So how's training been? We'll touch on that a little bit too, because I feel like we haven't done training updates in a little bit of time.
It's not been bad. Just been doing a lot of walking. I was talking to my wife last week, and actually she brought it up. She asked if she could start using the gym downstairs, and I was like, yeah, absolutely. She's like, I don't know what I'm doing, and I was like, all right. So she's like, basically, I want you to start working out with me in the morning. So I'm like, check, let's do it. That sounds like a plan, because we've been doing, I kind of scheduled everything recently around family and trying to incorporate family into my plan more than just, this is a non-negotiable and this is what I'm going to do. I was been trying to make a way that it was us doing it instead of just me doing it.
Yeah.
So it was a step that I wanted to do anyways, and organically it came to fruition. So I guess Monday we're going to start in the morning at the home gym together, and she's gonna start on to if we're doing what I do, she's gonna go head over heels into it. So I'll hopefully have some actual gym updates next week.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's like, it reminds me of the old adage, if you can't beat them, join them. Not that
right
there's like a competitive nature there, but if you can't beat your family in the sense of my time cannot override their time, well, then join them and somehow structure it so you include your family in those things, not only because of efficiency, but also because you want to. Like I remember when this is going way, way, way back, when you and I first met and we talked about your goals and you being in the gym. I wouldn't say for the first time because you had been in the gym for sports when you were younger, but in adulthood and consistently for the first time, you said that part of what sparked everything was wanting to have a kid and or kids and be there for your kids and be like having that like exemplar mentality or leadership for them, like showing them what health
Right.
and fitness is about. And you can't preach health and fitness to your kid if you're not living by it yourself. So it's pretty cool to see that now all these years later, you're actually still living by that and trying to take charge in it.
Absolutely. You know, it's literally a driving force, you know, going from one extreme to another a lot of times is bad, but in a situation like this where it was literally life or death, it was really not hard, and now it hasn't been hard to always have it as a focus because you know once you get a taste of freedom, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
I want to make sure my kid never has to. I don't ever want my kid to ever not know what freedom tastes like, you know, for metaphor's purpose, right?
Mhm.
Like I want her to just be raised that way, so she just knows this is part of life. This is what you do. You know, we're going to eat these things and we're going to do these things and we like it because it's what we've always done.
Yeah.
You know, almost to use a little bit of what you say we shouldn't do. If you always do what you always done, you always get what you always got. I guess it's okay if that's good stuff, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Normalize the habits that you want because then it becomes normal and they don't have to
right.
like it's much easier to raise a child the right way, so to speak, quote unquote, the right way, or with the habits that you are trying to instill, than it is to recreate that after a couple years of raising the child and then trying to change the diet, because that's
Right.
obviously going to be a tall task. And then plus the other big thing to consider here, obviously, I'm just stating the obvious, is the importance of understanding actions speak louder than words. Like people are going to listen to what they're going to observe and in a sense listen based on what you do, not based on what you say. So if I were to preach to someone the importance of nutrition, and then every time they saw me, I was eating fast food, that's going to kind of invalidate me in a sense, because it's like, well, this guy
Right.
doesn't follow his own advice, so I'm not going to listen to him. Like leadership in the purest sense, and we've talked about this before, is you have to like lead the charge. You have to be out in front. Leadership isn't shouting commands from the back; it's shouting commands from the front, in a sense.
Right.
So
You know, and I've
wanting that for your family.
actually seen that. Yeah. And I've actually seen that be a fact. Like in times of when I've slipped off of the diet, you know, and slipped back into old habits over the last couple of years, you know, my family and the people around me expected one thing. And then once, you know, it was cool with me preaching and all the things, like saying all the things that I would say about, you know, how important it is to eat right or exercise or whatever. And then when I started to slowly slip away at times, they were okay with that too. Like
Yeah.
it's easy to get complacent in the now. So you gotta keep it relevant. You gotta keep, you know, what you preach and what you do aligned. Because otherwise, you know, people are like little kids. Like babies, when they grow, are like sponges. You know, they
Oh yeah.
feed off of what they see and what they hear. So if I think it's like pivotal that she starts to see what we're doing now, you know, because when she starts to get older, she's gonna feed off of what she's seen and what she's heard. And
Mm-hmm.
I want that message. I've always thought I wanted that message to be always productive.
Yeah.
You know,
Sure.
always be a good person that does the right things all the time.
And then I think that when you live a life of like example, like lead by example, and you're aiming for leadership, and it doesn't have to be like with nutrition and wellness, it could be anything. Like if you're a business oriented family and like you run your own company, then you want to instill like a business mindset from a very early age. So if you're constantly working and you normalize those type of habits, then consequently your family's going to catch on and live that lifestyle as well. So one of the talking points that kind of brings up and that I think about is your friends are like that too. Like we always talk about the importance of choosing the inner circle. And I think that if it's important to you, it'll be important to others. And we've talked about that before as well, that the more important something is to you, then the more respected that thing will be on other people. And the primary, talking point for me is like when it comes to my nutrition, especially during a prep, like when I would diet for a show, my first couple of shows, people would kind of like not beg, but kind of plead and try to get me to go out to eat. Like, oh, come on, it's just one cheat meal. It's not going to hurt. Or, it's just one party that you can go to or whatever. Whereas now people don't even ask just because like they respect it. Number one. Number two, they respect me enough to not ask. And then I think also number three is the fact that I've surrounded myself with people that do the same thing, not necessarily compete, but like-minded individuals. So they wouldn't want me to do that either.
Right.
So like with the inner circle and all that stuff, your habits will not only, I mean, realistically, your habits are going to change or kind of morph or alter the state of the people that you're around the most. So obviously family would be at the forefront of that most likely. And then colleagues and coworkers and friends would kind of fall in line next. And maybe that you start to change or shape their lives. Cause I'm sure that like you with your weight loss journey have sparked the interest or been the kind of like the race gun to start other people doing the same.
Yeah, for sure. There's been a few for sure. And that's always weird to me because I've never been one that likes attention, and that obviously sparks attention. But it has been weird but cool at the same time because it's like, I've always been, I've always been an example of some sort, and it was usually not to the positive effect, right?
Mm-hmm.
But so to become an example, to a positive effect was weird. And now it's almost, I almost don't like being told about it. Like,
yeah,
you can use me as an example, but come on, keep it to yourself because it makes me feel weird.
Well,
like,
I
I
think
don't
the
like
other
it.
part
I don't like
about that is there's responsibility then too, right?
Right. That's for sure.
Like, I'm not saying that you live
Absolutely.
up to what everybody wants you to do or expects you to do, but then there is a little bit of the expectation that comes with that, where if people are, and we've talked about that ad nauseum at this point with the podcast being kind of like putting ourselves out there, and now, okay, we can't preach this stuff if we don't live this stuff. And like, I have it happen all the time where even in the gym, if I do something that's less than ideal, like in terms of like fitness or health or what people dub to be in that vein. Like if I'm eating food that if I have a pizza at a party or whatever, and everybody will say, "Oh, I didn't know you were allowed to eat that." Now, obviously, I'm human and I do those things probably more regularly than some people would think, but it just shows you that like for me, it gives me a little bit of accountability. Like, okay, these people expect this of me. I need to hold myself to a higher standard because evidently some other people do as well.
Right.
So I think
Absolutely.
that's certainly a motivating part of it.
The one thing that happened over the last week that kind of made me think about it was when I first started this whole thing, when we first started this whole thing, I used to do like little videos on the social media before I knew how the algorithm worked that probably would have been beneficial if I knew how to use like the algorithm, right?
Mm-hmm.
But one of them popped up on my timeline like a memory the other day, and I listened to it and watched it and listened to it, mainly just listened to it. But I'm not gonna go back completely in the whole thing, but one of the things that I was saying on the thing was I've never felt accomplished sitting on the couch. It doesn't matter if it's early in the morning or if it's, late night and you're just absolutely beat. Do something. It doesn't matter what it is. Like, so it's like the same thing we're talking about today, where we're talking, we started the show talking about it doesn't take an hour or 5 hours or a complex plan. Go and pick something up heavy for 10 minutes.
Yep.
Go for a walk, eat a salad or instead of a cheeseburger. It doesn't have to be complex. It doesn't have to be difficult. You just got to do it. And then what I closed out with in that video was stop saying one day and start saying today.
I like that.
And that was so good. But I remember, that like really sparked something in my mind to think about how good it felt to be 450 pounds in that video. I remember that video.
Yeah.
I was 450 pounds. And, that was like, what, 75 pounds down, basically? Mm-hmm. I know. Yeah. Right. Yeah. 75 pounds down. So how good I felt at 450 pounds versus the 360 I'm sitting at right now mentally. For where you're at on the scale or on your bench press or whatever your thing is, right? It's what you're doing to make yourself feel better is kind of what I thought about. Is you got to do the things along the journey to get there.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah.
So I just thought that was cool. And I wanted to start, I wanted to make it more of an effort in my life to stop saying one day again, because I kind of find myself saying that again. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And start saying today.
Yeah.
Get back to the roots, so to speak. Keep saying today, not one day.
And I think that there's a little bit of like almost like a self-reflection or an introverted type of mentality that you need to take on, or look introspectively, I guess would be the correct word, in order to be better at that. So I think that we should go to a commercial break, because like always, that's going to kind of snowball into a broader topic that stems from there, because I think that we can eventually segue into like actionable steps from that. So I want to talk more about that. So let's go to a quick commercial break and we'll discuss that thinking point more when we come back. As listeners of the Chasing Dreams podcast, we know that you demand the highest quality at all times. If you're interested in quality, look no further than Beast Mode Baking. Beast Mode Baking aims to bring the highest quality, creative, and of course delicious baked goods to your home with nationwide shipping. All orders need to be pre-ordered to ensure they're packed fresh and shipped out to you as soon as possible. Beast Mode Baking offers a flat rate of $15 for shipping due to the size and weight of the cookies and doughs. So if you're interested in Beast Mode Baking, please contact CEO Shannon Knorr. That's at SKNORR13 on Instagram, and order your delicious baked goods today, because every time you support them, you're supporting the podcast as well. And we are back from our commercial break. All right, Justin, prior to the break, we talked about, living life by example. And then you kind of mentioned at the end there that it was important for you, based on this kind of memory that you had pop up on your social media, about leading by example, by doing things, essentially kind of doing things when you don't want to, like doing something and starting today, and that it doesn't take, a whole lot of effort necessarily to do something little when you don't want to. Because I think realistically, that's kind of what discipline is doing what you don't want to do when you don't want to do it. So going forward with this, then, I think that one thing that's really important is that you have to be very self-analytical, and you have to be able to self-analyze what your bad traits are if you're going to try to correct them. Like you mentioned, sitting down on the couch, just as, a kind of like rudimentary example. Like whenever you're sitting on the couch watching TV, being unproductive, that feeling of productivity, you're not really going to be able to replicate anyway else. And it's one of the most like euphoric feelings ever. So if you want to feel more productive, you're going to have to get off the couch and do something. So then what it did, Justin, is it kind of sparked like some thinking in my head of like, what are my bad habits, so to speak, that I need to be able to quote, get up and do something from? Like, what are my bad habits that I need to get away from and start to become more productive? Like several episodes ago, you and I talked about time killers, right? Like
Yeah.
we talked about cell phone usage and casual conversations that take too long or whatever. So in essence, I kind of think about how I allocate my time, because that's definitely a point of improvement that never stops improving for me or never stops trying to be improved on my end. So I'm going to ask you right off the cuff, like, what are some bad habits, I guess, that you have that you could find more productive measures to replace it with?
So one of the best examples, and we've talked about it, and we've actually, implemented change along the way. Excuse me. So sorry about that. Is gas station food.
Mm-hmm.
Over the years, it's ebbs and flows. A lot of times, for the majority of over the last 3-4 years, I've always packed a whole day's worth of food to take with me, because that's what works. But if you get into a bind and you start running behind, you don't make all your bills, and then you find yourself in a gas station. And this is where I've found is productivity sucker for me, because productivity on my end is the scale going one way or strength going one way and not the other. I want to get stronger, I want to get faster, and I want to get smaller. So if I'm not doing those things, then it's not right, and something's not right.
Yeah, and you could think of
So
productivity. Most
gas
people think of.
stations.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say gas station food, and not gas station in particular, but fast food. The things that are easy, not the things that are right.
Yeah.
So because you can get decent in a gas station, but you
Certainly in the
don't.
bind.
Most people don't, right? Yeah. If you go into a gas station, typically you're going to go for not the easy, but the quick, and they usually don't line up. Staying out of them, like when I've mentioned, I've been staying out of gas stations. That's because I was on a downward spiral and I got to fix it. So I'm like that. I know that is the culprit, because when I do one thing wrong, I do another thing wrong. I do another thing wrong. And then here I am, here you are, you find yourself at, a 6-day spiral where, we've talked about that at nauseum, to this point where you can miss a meal, just don't miss the next one.
Yeah. It's like that
you want to keep it. Yeah, exactly. So that's where, that was the one thing, for me is a lot of times is like gas stations, quick, easy food options. Because if we're talking about me in particular, the majority of mine is diet. It's got to be right. The diet's got to be right. So this machine works the way it's supposed to.
When I think that productivity has multiple layers, where normally when I think about it and when I posed the question, just the way my brain worked is I was thinking of ways to be more productive in the sense of doing something. So what do I need to do to replace this bad habit? Whereas, to be fair, much to your point, productivity can be and should be looked at as sometimes, what am I not doing? Because it's more productive for my goals for me not to eat anything at this fast food place right now, or for me not to get a snack from the gas station, or for me not to go to this party, or for me not to do whatever. So usually productivity, just in my brain, I tend to gravitate towards thinking being productive in the sense of doing something, but it could be, not doing something, which is more beneficial for us than anything. But herein lies the issue that we originally came out of the commercial break with, is what are your self-sabotaging bad habits? What are the things that you do that you need to correct? And I think that that's a constant battle that everybody needs to fight, or at least attempt to fight and kind of be mindful of. Because I know for me,
Yeah,
like, it varies.
right. Yeah, and what I was going to say is you have to constantly fight the things that you self-sabotage, because the second you stop, you're going to start doing it and you're not going to realize it.
Yeah, I think that, again, I've used this term several times on this episode, but it goes back to mindfulness. You need to be self-aware of those habits and constantly keep them at bay. I mean, I know people in my life, very close friends, that have suffered with addiction, whether it's substance abuse or whatever, and that's a constant battle. I mean, you can be years and years deep into sobriety, and it takes 5 seconds to fall back in and ruin it all. And it's not like after, I mean, with some of the people I talk to, it's hard to fight that off even after years of being clean from it. So, like, I mean, we could look at all of our bad habits as addictions, because if it's a habit, it's constant. And if it's constant, then it's an addiction. Because if it wasn't an addiction, we would stop and it wouldn't be constant anymore. Like, no one likes to have bad habits. Typically, it's that we can't stop them, or we're unaware of them, or both.
Right.
So I think that part of it is being mindful. Like, even if things are going well, constantly be mindful of how easy it would be to fall back into the trap that you just escaped. I think that would be a good actionable step for our listeners going forward for the rest of the day or the week for them is, hey, you know, we could do this too, because we always exercise, no pun intended, we always exercise what we preach. What are some traits or habits that you're going to try to break, and how can you replace it, or what can you feasibly replace it with more productive things? Because I think that if you find something specific, like a higher degree, it's like aim small, miss small. A higher degree of specificity is going to give you better results. So, like, for me, if I have a bad habit, instead of saying, well, I just need to replace it with doing this, or maybe I could do that, or I think that I need to make it specific. So instead of eating this pizza, keep, you know, something in your car that you can replace it with. Keep a bottle of whey protein with you at all times, so that way you could make a quick shake because you have access to water anywhere. So you can put a couple scoops of that in and drink a protein shake versus having a piece of pizza. That's obviously just a very simple example, but try to find out what your bad habits are. And then I think that it would be best to make a replacement habit or a more productive habit that's specific, because then you aren't sitting there thinking, oh, well, what should I do instead of doing this? I'm not really sure, you know?
Right.
I just know how my brain
No, I
works. And I
agree.
just think that that would be the best way for me to go about it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, you know, sometimes it takes 5 or 6 good habits to replace one bad habit too.
Yeah, that might be the case. Yeah, you're right.
You know, because like if you want to get down to the brass tacks of it, if your habit is eating, you know, you may have to add in walking and hydrating and eating right and staying out of groceries or gas stations and fast food joints, just so your eating habit changes, because you got to add in everything else that's going to consume your time to make you stop thinking about the food.
Yeah, and I think
If
that
it's a
it's pretty
food
obvious
addiction
to
thing.
think about that, because if you have someone that has this bad habit, it was just, for a lot of people, if the bad habit was just as simple as replacing it with something good, then we all wouldn't have bad habits. I agree. That's a really good point, that it may take multiple streams to kind of like elicit the change that you're looking for, to like deviate away from the bad habit that you have and into more productive measures, for sure. It's definitely a good point. I like that.
I think it's also important to note that don't get frustrated with yourself when the first thing that you think of as the fix doesn't work.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because there's 7 days in a week, there's 24 hours in a day, there's 365 days in a year. So obviously we don't want to rely on the whole year to get it right, because then that's a lot. Okay, I'm going to start eating right, and it's Wednesday. Don't wait till Monday, because you're losing 4 days. But 2, once you make that choice and you start to do something that you think is better, and you realize 4 days into it that it's not, just change it. Don't get frustrated. Don't get, upset because you squandered them 4 days, because you were at least trying those 4 days. If you scheduled to start on Monday, you forfeited those 4 days. Is how I've kind of looked at it. Like that was what I used to talk about all the time was, there's no time like the present. So it's not on April 1st, I'm going to start losing weight. Horse crap. It's May 3rd or it's March 3rd. Start today. Don't wait till April. Start today. Start right now. You ate a pizza, and I mean a whole pizza for lunch. Start at dinner time. Make your next meal count. And then compound your wins.
Yep. I think that's
and I always,
because I'm sorry to interrupt you there. I think that's really good advice because
no, you're good.
When you talk about forfeiting days, if you're kind of in this experimental process of replacing bad behaviors with good behaviors, if you wait 4 days to start that, like, okay, I'm going to start this process and eliminate my bad behavior on Monday. That takes 3 days. Let's say it's, Thursday. So you got Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then you're going to start on Monday. So you can say that, well, then Monday rolls around and the replacement behaviors that you're trying to instill aren't being effective and not working. So now that takes another 4 days of trial and error. So the bad days can compound too, or the ineffective days. So if you're trying to solve a problem, like you alluded to, try to solve it right now. Try to immediately identify some example replacement behaviors that you can try to see if you kind of instill some more productivity in your life.
Right. Well, because the emotional response is right now. When you have the thought or the urge to do something and put something into action, you have an emotional response to that thought. If you table it, the emotional side of it isn't as strong. You don't have that right now feeling, that urgency. You gotta play on your emotions at times. When you get into your feels and you start to feel like you want to make a change about whatever it is you're doing, where you're working, how your life's going, how your finances are, how your diet is, how your figure looks, whatever it is. When you get to the point where you are thinking about it, not somebody else is pointing it out, you got to take action on that, because otherwise you're going to lose the fire that you're going to have to stoke a fire that isn't there when you have a fire that you just lit because you thought about it.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, you got to strike while it's hot. So I think that's a great place to wrap it up for this week for sure. So going forward, then you and I will do the same. Let's spend the week trying to identify some bad habits or problem behaviors that we have and try to replace them with one, or if necessary, multiple more productive measures that will eventually lead us to chasing our dreams. So with that, we have come to the end of another episode of the Chasing Dreams podcast with Charlie and Justin. This has been episode 140. And as always, we appreciate your guys' listenership, and we look forward to hearing back from you all next week. Unbreakable,